Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kamel Greene, CEO of Poly Platform, and today we have my good friend, my professor, my mentor, Rex Facer, here with us today. And as you guys know, this is Thursday Thoughts, and what we typically do is we bring someone who works within the municipal, the public, the private sector, and we want to know what gets them engaged. We are Poly Platform, that engagement platform. So today, we got Rex. Tell us about yourself.
So, yeah, I'm a professor at Brigham Young University, where I teach in the public administration program, which is where you and I met. It has been a lot of fun. I've done that for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. And most recently, I've been engaged in redistricting. So trying to redraw the political boundaries for Congress, the state legislature, and the state school boards. And that's been an interesting voyage.
Wow. Well, I know, before you came on, we talked a little bit about that. When it comes to this Utah Redistricting Committee, what has been, or this commission, moreover, what has been, one I would say is what is the objective first, and then the second part question is what has been the biggest difficulty in you kind of engaging or navigating this effort?
Sure. The goal is to create these new boundaries for Congress. So in Utah, we have 4 congressional districts. We'll be redrawing those boundaries. And then we've got state house and state senate districts as well as school board districts. And so our goal is to redraw those in a fair way that engages with the citizens of Utah so that they feel that they have a voice. Right. Historically, redistricting has often been criticized for gerrymandering, drawing those boundaries just for political purposes. Right. And our goal is to try and do it in a fair and neutral way. And so our biggest challenge, so far, has been figuring out how to make sure we engage with the public in a way that allows them to participate fully with the commission, as well as learning all of this new stuff about redistricting, things that we didn't necessarily know about a few months ago.
Oh, for sure. Well, definitely want to get into that more as far as the engagement standpoint, but I want to take a step back. One of the best, most beneficial classes I feel like I've taken was a class from you in the MPA program, and it was public policy. And we actually worked on an initiative within Utah County. What was the transition between, what I would say is, how did you even get into being involved within the local space where you wanted to work on these type of activities?
Sure. I guess the way that I've been involved and gotten involved in things is through networks of relationships. Okay. I think about the opportunity to serve on the Utah County Good Governance Commission, which is where I had the students help us. Mm-hmm. And that was because of a relationship that I had with Cameron Martin, who was a good friend of mine from way back. Yeah. But he asked me to join him, and in part because of the expertise that I had in local government management over the years, but also simply because he saw me as somebody who was going to play honest in this process of being engaged and trying to recommend things that are going to be better for the citizens.
Got you. Wow. Well, that's amazing. And I guess these are questions that I'm interested in is, at an early age, what got you interested into the local space in general?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking a little bit about this. I listened to a few of the other interviews that you had done with some folks. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking, what was it that kind of got me engaged early on? And, I grew up in a kind of modest income family. My dad was a mechanic. My mom, after I graduated, went back to school and became a nurse. And so I didn't necessarily have role models that were working in cities or anything, but I had this sense that I wanted to be involved. I wanted to do something that would allow me to make a difference. And I didn't quite know what that was, and it wasn't until I was in university that I had kind of the light go on when I realized that, I'm okay at economics, I'm okay at this public administration and political science stuff. And all of that started to come together and coalesce really around local government kinds of issues for me.
And you talk about local government kind of issues and making a difference. And I feel like a lot of times local government flies under the radar. However, it's instrumental every day. We all, to some capacity, live within some type of organized government. From a local standpoint. And I feel like a lot of times people don't necessarily know about it, and they don't know what they can do. And you mentioned the Utah Good Governance Committee, you mentioned this redistricting commission. And my question to you is, how can a citizen, how can a resident become more involved?
Sure. I think one of the best ways to become more involved is to simply reach out to the city.
Okay.
Most cities, if you go to their websites, for example, will have a place that says something like volunteer. And there are a number of opportunities to volunteer, whether it's on the library board, the planning commission. There are a whole host of ways to volunteer, to be engaged. But the other thing to do is just go to city events.
Right.
See how things work. Volunteer to be a coach in the Little League or the soccer tournament. I mean, in some ways, that was probably one of the first kind of volunteer opportunities that I had, was to serve as a coach for the soccer league for my girls as they were growing up. And I think for a lot of people, that's the way we volunteer and engage with our communities. But there are a lot of other ways to do that as well. And if you reach out to the city, they're often looking for people who want to help and want to help make a difference.
Right. I think I'm glad you touched on that, because that touches on really our goal here with Poly Platform. Going, within the MPA program and working for some cities and understanding that engagement component was huge. And sometimes residents don't know what they don't know. And so facilitating a tool, a platform in which residents can go to and be more involved, be more engaged, hopefully within our mission, that's something that we can fulfill. Kind of more towards you, going back towards the redistricting commission. Earlier when we spoke, you talked about some of the difficulty in what you run into and kind of even learning what are the difficulties, moreover, that's happening in regards to this commission, maybe some recent events. What does that look like?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges that we just had, we had our first public meeting, and because the commission is committed to being open and engaged and transparent in the work that we do, we wanted to engage with the public. And so we had an open Zoom meeting, which unfortunately had some folks come in and Zoom bomb us. And so we ended up having to cut the meeting short. And so we're going to have to try and engage differently on this next time to make sure that we don't expose people to those kinds of inappropriate images and sounds that they had to hear. Yeah. But it's all about not wanting to lose that engagement that's so important to us. And that's why we tried the strategy that we did, and it didn't work. Right. And so now we're going to have to try something else. Yeah. But as you say, this notion of engaging with people and engaging with the public is critically important, especially if we want them to see that what we're doing is on their behalf.
Exactly. Well, I think that's extremely important. And, learning, more policy from you and kind of understanding how to navigate certain parameters. My question for you is, what has been the most satisfying or most, satisfying thing that you have done within the past 10 to 15 years? Because you have a tremendous experience within the municipal space. And so what has that been? What has been the biggest accomplishment, moreover, for you?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I've had the opportunity to be involved in a number of things. I served on the Federal Salary Council under President Obama for about 7 years, I guess it was. And we made recommendations to the president on pay for federal employees. That was extremely satisfying. And but then I had the opportunity to serve on this Utah Good Governance Commission that you talked about. That was satisfying to see a group of I think there were 15 or 17 of us come together and reach a consensus about what we thought would be a good policy option for the residents of Utah County and how to govern ourselves. Unfortunately, that ended up not passing, but we also have seen some of the downsides of that not passing in some of the recent actions of the county commission, and that was exactly what we had warned about. And so getting it right, even though it doesn't go all the way through, is still a very satisfying thing. Right. But probably the most satisfying thing for me has been watching my students grow and develop and have opportunities. At the end of the day, that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and that's been very satisfying. I'm now at a place where I want to be able to make that impact myself as well. And having those kinds of options available to us really is exciting, and that's one of the things that made me interested in serving on the Independent Redistricting Commission.
Right. Well, one, that's amazing, and the way you articulated that was amazing as well. I learned so much from you, from the HR class, from the public policy class. Touching more into the professor capacity. What do you like most about being a professor?
I think being able to get people to think about things that they wouldn't have thought about otherwise, to see things through a new lens, is very satisfying. Right. We're just wrapping up this semester. I've been teaching the public policy class, and I've had 34 students all doing different public policy issues. And it has been fun to watch them over the course of the semester start by simply trying to define a problem and eventually getting to where they've got some solutions. Watching that growth and knowing that they're now going to be able to take that out into the real world and apply it, working for cities, working for states, working for the federal government, that they're now going to be part of the levers that are going to be pulled to make an impact and help out everyday citizens, not just in the U.S., but across the world. That really is a satisfying feeling.
Wow. It always, every time, last time when I was in a class with you, and it was an HR class, just the knowledge and the intellect that you have in regards and the experience that you have. And so you have so much. So, Rex, and it's already weird saying Rex because not too long ago you were my professor. But Rex, you have so much experience. You've done so much things. Where do you see yourself within the next 10 years? Is it still being a professor? Is it trying to dabble a little bit more into the private or public sector outside of it? What does that look like to you?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question and one that I've actually been thinking a fair amount about. I think for me, part of what is most important is I want to make sure that I continue to have opportunities to make impacts. And whether that is continuing as a professor somewhere, whether that's serving as an HR manager in a government agency, whether that's being a director for a nonprofit organization. I can't really say with 100% certainty, but what I can say is what drives me is trying to make a difference. And whatever context I'm in, I want to be trying to make a difference, whether that's in a professional association, whether that's as a faculty member, whether that's as a person in my neighborhood. Right. I hope that I'm able to add value.
I'm sure you will be. And so this is Thursday Thoughts, and so we like to get deep. And as you spoke, a question popped in my head. I had sort of an epiphany. And you're my professor, and so I used to, and I still like to, is ask questions. And so you talked a lot about making a difference, but you've also alluded to throughout this conversation engagement. And so with the juxtaposition of engagement and making a difference, some people may think it's rhetorical. What do you think is the gap? What do you think can bridge those things together to actually, for making a difference to truly be fulfilled? Because, I'll give some answer to it, is that I see that that's a problem, I would say, because a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And so you work within this space. You have tons of knowledge. What do you think can bridge that gap with the juxtaposition of both of those components?
Well, first, let me say that one of the things I always appreciated about you as a student is that you ask great questions. And it causes you to stop and have to think. And as we think about these issues around engagement and other things, it really does create a challenge because, as you said, people often don't know what they don't know. And if they don't know that there are ways that they can let their voice be heard, and that it can actually resonate and make a difference. Think about my wife, for example, who, as our children were growing up, she used to go and volunteer at the library as a storyteller. So she'd go and read books to the kids, and she did that for several years. And I'm sure that when she was doing that, the only thing she was thinking about was, here, I'm having this great time, I'm helping these little kids, they have a good experience with their parents, and that's wonderful. But what came out of it was she was eventually asked to serve on the library board. And now she has the opportunity to help make an impact. They've got a new library that she helped give voice to. And so it was that engagement that she maybe wasn't necessarily seeking out at first, But by putting herself out there, she had opportunities that came open. And now she's looking for new opportunities.
Wow, that's beautiful for sure, and I think that answers my question as far as that. I have one more question for you, and then it's Thursday Thoughts. I always say, you can ask me a question. It's not just me talking to you, and so I'll give you some time to think about that while I ask this. And so my question to you is it's not an elephant. There was recent events within the summer. I wouldn't say a lot of those are new. It's just more overt, I would say. What do you think can further mitigate where we currently are in this climate?
Yeah.
I had to ask you these questions. You were my professor, public policy, all that.
It's an interesting question because you look back. Not only have we been through a pandemic, but we've seen the violence towards people like George Floyd, and too many other people to count, really, which is quite tragic. And I think one of the things that is disheartening about all of that is that we often don't see the people affected as relevant to us.
It's a number.
It's a number. It's a statistic. It's something we see on the television. But I think one of the things we've got to do is we've got to start getting closer to people. We had a speaker at BYU a few years ago, Brian Stevenson. A great
Leaning
movie.
into the dissidents.
and one of the things he talks about is getting close, right? Being proximate. And I think that's one of the things that helps us. And it's one of the challenges that we especially have here because it's easy to not get proximate to people who are different. And if we don't do that, we'll never hear their stories and we'll never see their humanity. And I think that really is part of the major challenge that we have is how do we see the humanity, but more importantly, how does that humanity drive our behavior so we start showing that care and compassion for others. We may believe that people have dignity and worth, but what are we doing to show that? And I think that's really, from my perspective, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. And that's why we have conversations around diversity and social equity and inclusion and all of these kinds of things. It's because we haven't figured out how to get close to people and how to see people really as the real people that they are.
Yeah, genuine. Those genuine interactions so we can create that dialogue and really lean more into that dissonance and get proximal.
Yeah,
I think you definitely hit it right there. Wow. And just to let you, these questions are just free flow, so that was a beautiful response. And so, like what I say, this is Thursday Thoughts. It's not just me talking. What question do you have for me?
Well, I think one of the questions that I have is, what gave you the vision for engagement? Why care about engagement? For all of the things that are out there, right? We've got, we just talked about some of the social justice problems that we have. Why engagement? Out of all of the social issues that you could have chosen, why try and get people to come together?
Right. Great question. For me, where I'm from and kind of how I've grown up, I've always been, forced to assimilate to a certain extent, right? I would like to say that, 7 years ago, our forefathers brought forth from this continent a new nation conceived in liberty. I always denote that because I feel like the American dream has not necessarily been as accessible to everyone. And I give that context to say that the engagement aspect facilitates a perspective in which some people who may be aligned are already on a perspective or already see a perspective may not see behind them. And so historically, from my life, I've seen and had the privilege to go to certain schools that my friends didn't go to or other underprivileged groups didn't go to. And I quickly realized, from my opinion, from my standpoint, that the lack of understanding because the lack of engagement, because the lack of actually being proximal to being able to understand is huge. And as technology exacerbates and continues to grow, we tend to be within have reinforcing beliefs, right? The algorithms are designed like that. And so you hop on Facebook, and if you're friends with this group, then typically, and you like this content, then that's what you're going to see. And so there's a lack of engagement, and I feel like it's only exacerbating. And so I want to build a tool in which not only can you know what's going on, and it's not, the administrator having to shift through so much noise to be engaged with their constituents. Residents can know and be informed. You also can go to activities and events where you connect with people from a genuine standpoint in which you touched on. And so from a logical standpoint, A plus B equals C, I think that in order for us to resolve our differences, become proximal, lean into dissonance, we have to, one, be engaged. And so that's the mission, that's the meaning behind the engagement that I like to, touch on in regards to poly.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Awesome, well, thank you. Well, listen, I love these Thursday Thoughts. You all stay tuned for more. But one thing I would like to say is, Professor Facer, Rex Facer, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you big time, and I've learned so much. And I'm blessed for the opportunities that have been afforded for me through the committee, through getting to understand and see how things operate from an intergovernmental standpoint. It's been a blessing. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be part of your life. It brightened my experience, so thank you.
Awesome.